Guys, welcome to the Vlad Catcher Show, the number one show for founders, execs, and entrepreneurs who are scaling their businesses. This video is presented to you by Tabs, and we have an incredible interview for you today with their founder and CEO, Ali Hussain, about how he created and scaled this business. Ali, welcome to the show.
Awesome, Vlad. Thanks for having me. It's great to be on the show.
So let's just start at the beginning. So what is the origin story of Tabs? How did this thing come about?
Yeah, Tabs is a culmination of a decade of a team of operators who have mostly been in companies. Like myself, I was a COO for a good amount of the last decade. The rest of our founding team had been in companies, like working closely with finance teams. And ultimately, we realized a lot, even before AI, was changing around the finance stack. When you think about the ERP, a lot of the key components of the ERP had already left to really amazing platforms like Ramp and Tipalti and Coupa, Rippling, Gusto, everything managing the vendor and the employee. And it was our own frustration with the customer side of finance. How do you actually manage revenue with customers? Where we realized there had not been a similar reset around finance operations, and felt that when we started the company in early 2023, finally, there was a technological moment with AI where there was an opportunity to bring the customer relationship to finance in a completely reimagined way. And so that was the problems we had felt, which was everything related to revenue, whether it was billing, revenue recognition, cash application, had broadly been left behind. And we ultimately realized that AI was going to be this amazing technological layer to finally help solve these pain points for our customers. And we got started.
Can you give us some examples of use cases or some really useful features of Tabs?
Absolutely. So the top use case for us is how do we help companies collect their cash far faster and more with a lot less overhead, and then quickly be able to recognize that revenue. And so the most common use case is taking a contract, which what Tabs does for our hundreds of customers is you basically upload a contract either via Salesforce or DocuSign into Tabs. Our AI extracts that. We automatically create and send invoices. We follow up with the customers and get paid on those, all with very little human interaction. From that, because we have the contracts, we're able to do all the accounting against that, so we can read the contract, understand the contract term, and help finance teams recognize that revenue. And so that's the most common use case. I think where we get excited is when we look at some of the companies over the last 12 months that have scaled incredibly fast. You take a very well-known company that's a customer of ours, like a Cursor, or you look at many of the others on our website, like a StatSig. Not only have they been able to automate these very painful workflows, they've been able to maintain incredibly lean teams and run a ton of contract to cash and revenue off of a system like ours. And so that is our most common use case.
Who's usually the ideal customer, Ali? Like, who's usually the person who buys your product?
Yeah, we're excited to primarily focus on the finance team, Vlad. We think broadly, especially with a lot of AI, but even before AI, a lot of the innovation helped product teams, sales teams, engineering teams. And I think broadly speaking, we believe that finance is not only the largest buyer of software. When you think about the overall ERP TAM, it is the largest enterprise application market in the world. But when it comes to actually getting access to modern UI, AI, building towards agents, we think the market has been incredibly underserved. And so we primarily focus on finance teams, and specifically within the finance teams, the buyer is mostly the CFO, often the controller, and it helps alleviate a lot of the pain for the accounting team. So that's primarily our buyer. From time to time, because our teams we often work with are able to be so lean, a CEO or a founder or a COO may be involved, or their outsourced accounting firm, but finance teams are our primary focus here at Tabs.
What would you look for in your sales leader, Ali? So whenever you bring in either a sales manager or like a VP of sales, what would you look for in that role?
Yeah, I think a few things. One is just kindness. Like sales sets the tone of the entire culture. Like there are teams where if there's not a great working culture of kindness and collaboration, sales and what I call the supply side product and engineering start to find a lot of tension in the early days. And that continues from a path dependence period over a long period of time. And so kindness is huge. I think the second is someone who is willing to do the really hands-on work. A sales leader or a VP of sales or sales executive cannot lead if they can't sell and understand the product, especially in the early days. We're not talking hundreds of AEs, we're talking 20, 30 AEs, and they will build respect by demonstrating they are by far the most knowledgeable about the product and the objections they're going to feel in market. And so I'd say those are two really important things. We, in fact, in the early days, one of our co-founders actually ran go-to-market for a long period of time because they could help not only bring kindness and product acumen, but could be the best voice of the customer to then bridge that information with our product leader. And so for many of you who are still pre-Series A or pre-Series B, your best sales leader may be one of your co-founders for sure, as well as whoever's owning product. And I think many times your product leader needs to be almost a co-sales leader, if not indefinitely, certainly for your first 5, 10 million in revenue before you even think about bringing a third-party sales leader.
Should the VP of sales or a sales manager, should that person also be great at sales? Or do you think that person needs to be more great at managing, process, all that stuff? What's your take on this two? Because they're kind of different profiles, right?
They need to be great at sales, 100% great at sales. I think the process management side, if you're really good at sales, you're, I think, aware enough on some of the other shortcomings you need to develop. But a great CEO, a great person in business operations or RevOps can help bring some of that gap. But as a company, the number one thing is to close deals and close many of them. And everything else, in my opinion, is noise.
How about product, Ali? You built this great product. What were some of yours biggest product learnings?
I think a few things. One is you must, in parallel to product, build a high velocity shipping culture. Because at the end of the day, you think you know who your customer is, but you're only going to discover yourself and who the best customer is through customers using your product. And you never earn that right unless you build enough product alongside selling that gives you the perfect data points to further refine where to focus. And so to me, product must be coupled. And oftentimes I even believe ahead of product, you need product design so you can quickly come to POCs or MVPs. And then you need an engineering culture that solves for speed and good enough quality to get yourself out there and learn. Obviously, at some point, you have to then harden that approach and add a ton of quality scalability. But those who overthink do not ship and therefore never find the customer side to really scale. And so I think one of the things I'm proud of is again, we're a company that really started in 2023. We didn't build product till late 2023, and we surpassed 7 figures less than 6 months after. And I think that was plausible, not because I'm the best seller. I think there are many people far better than me at selling at Tabs, but it was the culture of high velocity product design and an engineering culture, which was maniacal about building alongside our customers, that allowed us to capture the market as quickly as we've been able to today.
I'm sure some engineers will be watching this video, and what's an ideal type of engineer that you're looking for to hire at Tabs?
I think of, first of all, any engineer who is excited to live in New York and interested in Tabs, please reach out to me. I'd love to personally meet you. But what I'd say is a few things. I would say almost everyone on the engineering team one day wants to start a company. And so I think with that, there's a type of engineer we have who is not only incredibly intelligent, but driven, as Tabs not only being an incredible ride for them to learn the technical parts of company building, but also deep curiosity about what sales is doing, what implementation's doing, customer success is doing, not only because I think it allows them to be better engineers at Tabs, but it is augmenting a skill set they were never able to have when they were at Google or a Series C company or working under some other startup where they had no exposure to the broader company. And so I would say any engineer who's just excited about company building and entrepreneurship typically tends to be a great fit at Tabs. I think the second is, though there's a lot of thought around what makes an AI engineer, and yes, it's great if you know machine learning or you've been trained at another AI company, but I think the second part is just engineers who are incredibly curious about using new types of tools, new types of ways of building, learning what other AI tools can do to accelerate the speed in which they ship or add more AI features in our product set. So I'd say both someone who wants to be an entrepreneur and someone who may not have had the privilege of working purely on ML or AI or have a PhD, but are incredibly AI curious, they can learn to be AI forward at Tabs by bringing those skill sets together and training under our leadership.
There's also so much stuff happening in AI now, right? There's just and it's moving so quickly. How are you guys thinking about AI at Tabs?
I think there's a lot of it where we are setting a bar on where we think AI is going. And by being kind of futurist in how we solve problems. So we are identifying problems our customers have. We're building strong conviction that AI is either able to do this today or it will in the next 6 to 12 months. And then we're just betting towards that. And in many cases, it's fully the technology that gets us there. In some cases, we have to create some internal tooling that requires other operational workflows to support where the product must get to through true AI in the next 6 to 12 months. But what we're not doing is sitting on our thumbs and saying, oh, like we're going to put this feature on pause because we're going to wait to see where the next OpenAI models land or what our partners at LangChain give us. We're moving with the belief that we're going to get there to delight our customers with experiences that none of our competitors or none of the incumbents are able to provide because they're too far gone with that level of understanding about where AI is going.
I'm also sure kind of these 2 years, right, from 2023 till today was like quite a journey, like I'm sure it was because you guys grew so fast. So I'm sure it was kind of like an adventure. If you could go back and give yourself kind of some advice at the beginning, having all this knowledge now, what would you say to yourself, Ali?
I think the number one thing would be just trust the process. Like there was a time early where we're incredibly anxious, right? You have no customers, you're on calls getting no's right away. But I think we did the first principle thinking, which is just don't build until you've truly talked to hundreds of people and gotten a hell yes, that this is a pain point. And I think in that we carried a lot of anxiousness on, oh, are we building yet? Is it fast enough? Should we be charging more? And I think all of those things kind of figure itself out so long as you're going after a very large TAM, an incredibly painful problem, and a type of problem that can be completely reimagined with new technologies like AI. And if I look back to 2023, we were actually doing that, but I think we were carrying a level of urgency that often created doubt of that process. And so the top thing I tell folks is stay calm, go after a really large market, and trust the process.
What would you say is it all about, Ali? Like I interviewed another founder and he said to him, it's all about customer acquisition, right? Like he said, it's all about customer acquisition. Like it's all about this product has to get new customer versus another school of thought is it's all about the product. So that way it's viral enough to bring the customers word of mouth. What is kind of what's your thought process on what is it all about when you're building a tech company currently?
Yeah. For me, it is looking at a inevitable workflow. And so right now in AI, there's a lot of talk about, there are a lot of buyers who are just curious about testing different AI products, and they'll try 5 different products for SDR, BDR calling, and they'll try 5 different products for coding. I think one of the areas people often right now are missing are some of the very boring things, but they're inevitable. And so for us, something like billing and revenue, whether you're a company that's doing 5 million in revenue or $1 billion, being able to get your invoices out and collecting cash on services you're providing is what I call an inevitable workflow. And so for me, it's staying hyper focused on that. And in that, yes, driving a lot of demand to get people to use that inevitable workflow. But then as you're learning, making that product even better and compounding around that, incredibly important. But I would say right now, if you're excited about building an AI, focus on an inevitable workflow for the customer, make sure it's a large TAM, and just be maniacally focused about crushing that.
I'd like to ask one more question about engineers, Ali, because we all need engineers to build at tech companies. Do you feel that the current engineers are a bit too dependent on AI? Because it's like, I hear some friends saying, like, they interview an engineer and the engineer, only uses tools and can't even change the code or struggles to change the code. What's your kind of thought process on how engineers basically can be great engineers and not too over dependent on AI?
I don't think so. I think if you can be overly dependent on AI, that can be a good thing. I think the best engineers are just going to continue to get more efficient by being incredibly dependent on AI. I think the thing, Vlad, that is really important is how they're strategically thinking about that amongst other decisions around them. And so how are they working with their product teams to making sure that not only are they shipping fast with AI, it is serving the exact needs of what product has identified the customer needs? Or are they building it in a way where it is scalable, meaning they can ship something and it's fast, but can hundreds or thousands of customers use it? And is AI helping them there, or is there some other fundamental engineering or design decisions they need to make? Are they making the product actually usable? Are they working with design and with solutions? And so to me, the actual building side, if you're incredibly dependent on AI, no problem. In fact, I think you're going to be a winner, but you have to be strategically thinking about how you're deploying the build side with the other dependencies. And I think that is where the hyper excellent engineer is going to emerge over the next couple of years. Is yes, they can go build quickly, but are they considering the context and ensuring that is also done with incredible high quality?
Hmm. I have two more. I have two more questions for you, Ali. The first one's about culture, and the second one's about leadership. So about the culture, you read about many companies who say, they have such a strong company culture, right? Like, what's your advice on how to build a great company culture? And the second one I have about leadership is, how can we all be better leaders, right? Because there's so many leaders, from founders to executives to finance leaders. How can we be better leaders at our companies?
I think there's a couple of things. I think it is incredibly important to create consistent, continuous spaces for people to just ideate and bring incredible ideas forward. And so I think cultures that do not feel that they are run top down, yes, you need governance and you need leaders to guide and resource and set direction. But the best cultures are ones that are allowing and enabling phenomenal ideas from all aspects of the company to influence both myself as CEO's direction or founder's direction, but also the company's direction in terms of, hey, we actually think the larger ACV or revenue customers are better customers for us, or we should be adding more AI tooling to implementation, or this specific way to do the product or brand could be a lot clearer if we made this design decision. And so I think the best cultures are ones that nurture great ideas. And I think that's number one and the first and foremost. And I think you do that by creating environments that are psychologically safe and open and willing to listen to every team around great ideas. I think the second is a culture that, as a startup, it's really hard, but creates a form of very fast upward mobility. I think that is incredibly important. And so a culture that has open feedback around what it would take for someone to move in from customer service to product, or from being an IC in engineering to being a principal engineer. And so one that both encourages very fast career mobility and ownership and responsibility, but also becomes very explicit and clear on what are some of the things that individuals need to demonstrate to get there. I think those are just excellent formulas. I think as a leader, it is very important for leaders to set very clear goals and communicate them consistently. I think it is incredibly important that every single person in the company, and look, there's a lot of tools to do that. It could be OKRs, it could be KPIs. But I actually think even in the early days, like being very clear, like this is why we are a AI company. Here's the market we're going after. Here's our longer term roadmap. Here's why we're focusing on this customer type. Here's why it's very important for us to hit certain metrics, either for revenue or for product velocity or lead gen, but it all ties to get back together to an overall mission. And I think that clarity is incredibly important for leaders to not only be accountable to communicate that, but equally be accountable for any change they make to that focus, because it impacts everybody. And if there's a change, that's okay. Great cultures are agile, but also great cultures are focused. And so that agility must demonstrate focus, not uncertainty or insecurity with the game plan.
Another thing I'm very interested in, Ali, is that many CEOs, we all have different strengths, right? We're CEOs, right? But we all have very different strengths. For example, like I came from kind of a sales background, right? Like from sales, in my college days and younger days. So what would you say is your kind of real strength that allows you to be a great CEO?
Yeah, I think it is a balance. So a couple of things. One is and I wasn't always this way, but I think I'm incredibly, over time, I've developed a level of calmness and level-headedness. And like, look, this is an incredibly emotional, high stress, high velocity job. And I think the best thing a CEO can have, broadly speaking, is a level-headedness and calmness to be consistent in the good times, in the tough days, so that, yes, there will be emotionally exciting days and emotionally exhausting days, but every day almost feels the same because there's a calmness that this is a long game. And if we continuously compound, we're going to get to that end. And I think I wish I always had that, but I think as a CEO now, I'm trying to demonstrate that. I would ultimately call myself an orchestration CEO. I do not consider myself a visionary. I love selling, but I am by no means the best salesperson. I love thinking about product. I am the person who uses our product the most at the company. I use it for tabs, and so I get to use it. I have a lot of ideas, but I am by no means a product-led CEO. I'm an orchestrator. I like to see where the market's going in technology, in buyer preferences, in how they acquire a vendor. I like to be very close to sales, and I call that overall the demand side. And then I like to be very close to supplier, product engineering, onboarding, customer success. But my ultimate job is to be incredibly knowledgeable about the different challenges or goals of everyone on my team and orchestrate efficient and focused execution across the entire company. And so what I would say for any CEO is ultimately your obligation is to run the entire company, not just product or sales or investor relations. And as a part of that, a level-headed orchestration CEO, I think, is a big part of where the future goes, where there will always be someone smarter than you on your team at sales or better than you at AI. But if you can orchestrate, you can take the best of everything and hopefully do what I aspire to do, is build the best company.
Well, Ali, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your journey.
Likewise, Vlad, always a pleasure, and excited to keep it going.